People who escaped authoritarian governments. When did you know it was the right time for you to leave your country?
Not me, but I remember asking my mom why she left the Philippines in the 70s. She explained about the Marcos regime and how he declared martial law. She said when that was announced, she knew she had to leave. She had been working towards moving. Anyway, but she said that was her cue to hurry it up.
I visited the Philippines recently for the first time. They still talk about that time period. Your mom is a trooper for getting out of there.
My granddad left Poland after he was thrown in a concentration camp and escaped. He was very clever and bilingual in German. Made it to the UK. He was 16 in 1939.
Are you telling me he talked his way out of the Holocaust? Amazing.
The police just started harassing people on the streets after one of the protests in Belarus. Some of them got killed, some injured, thousands were imprisoned and tortured there. It is still happening. Also, I kinda was prepared for that psychologically for a long time before the violence erupted, because it was concealed for years. So when everything happened, I just took the first morning flight and left for another country. This is in 2 words. The story is a bit more complicated. Obviously, edit wow. I did not expect my story to attract so much interest. I will try to reply to some of the comments. I left for Kiev first, and in a week went to Germany. Migrating through Ukrainian border has been a popular route for many of my countrymen. In many cases, before the war started, they crossed the border themselves, as they did not need visa for that. I also already had a Schengen visa, as I was granted a fellowship with German University in March 2020, which was conducted in distant mode because of COVID-19. So the choice of destination was, in a way, a no-brainer. I was granted extension of my fellowship until December. Then I went to Lithuania to work for Tsikhanouskaya's office, our elected president. After that, I received an offer from German University and finally settled in Germany. Then I brought my family here as well, which was also a story in itself, as the border was closed when the Belarusian regime forcefully landed the plane with Pratesvich.
My friend's 70-year-old mother is refusing to leave even though she has family in the U.S. She doesn't want to give up the fight. I'm terrified for her.
When they arrested members of the opposition party for holding a primary. When police stormed and shut down headquarters of the only newspaper still critical of the government. When non-violent protesters were given longer sentences than violent convicts for having posters in their backpacks. When the heads of government were one by one replaced by toads with neither qualifications nor experience, purely based on their ass-kissing rhetoric. When they start passing legislation that you know will hurt people. And they don't care. When an extra panel of judges were suddenly appointed above the Supreme Court, with final decision on interpreting the law. When caring about it makes you lose sleep and starts to affect your work quality. It was never one thing, but you just see it getting worse and worse step by step. And you make a judgment call. The timing and reasons will be different between all your friends and family.
When my parents decided it was time to leave Saigon, 1979, and told us we're going to go see Grandma, and we're going to leave tonight, but you can't tell anyone and you have to be real quiet.
My grandpa fought for the South Vietnamese. We left when the U.S. soldiers abandoned their posts, and my grandpa was left with orders to get the hell out. Went home, grabbed my grandma and his 6 kids, and paid to get a boat to Indonesia. The U.S. attacked our country, and then abandoned all of the South. He fought for democracy in his country, and then was abandoned by those U.S. soldiers. He hated them for it, and decided to emigrate to Australia instead. To this day, I hate everything about the U.S. politics and its war machine. With the state of the U.S. now, I believe I am 100% justified, and so was my grandpa.
I used to know a cleaner whom was from Hattie. Right time was in 1980 when the Taunton Mackout came for her husband, a political dissident. That was the last time her and the kids saw him, and in the case of my first girlfriend, the daughter of a South Vietnamese general. They left the country in a small boat. When Saigon fell, during the crossing, the smugglers told her parents, either you give up all your gold, or we'll rape the women and throw you into the sea. They arrived in France with nothing. The father, a doctor, was then able to work, but not for the same salary as the French. He died a few years later, plunging the whole family into poverty. Once in a while, her mother would tell about what she had left in Vietnam.
A Vietnamese refugee told me her boat was stopped by pirates, and they demanded not only all the valuable, but one of the younger women.
Speaking for my grandmother, she left Hungary when the hospital she worked at took a direct hit around the October Revolution. It was amazing what she and her family survived for love of country before this.
Saw this and thought it'd mention. My wife's family came from Hungary, specifically escaping during the revolution as well. Her granddad was a freedom fighter during the protests, if I remember correctly. Rockup is the name if anyone is interested. I never got a chance to hear it from his angle aside from the living family telling me. It's interesting because my mill mentioned this fact to a MAGA friend of hers as one of the reasons why not to vote for Trump since he'd been cozying up to Putin and the like. The friend did not like that and yelled at her oddly enough, which makes this whole state of the world thing that much more infuriating. History is so important, and when you ignore it, it's like not even bringing the book to the open book test.
My grandfather, the bravest man I have ever known, fled Germany shortly before the Nuremberg laws were passed in late 1935. He had been a lawyer and had arranged everyone's passports, hidden some gold away, and established a place for them to flee. The judiciary was already under control of the regime. He took his wife and 5 children and crossed France into Belgium. And by 1936, he was applying for asylum to multiple countries, including the US, where he knew people in the embassy. He was summarily denied. As they began invading Belgium in May of 1940, the family fled along the coast on foot, separating children and adults so as not to all be traveling together, hoping their odds were better. My grandmother and my 2 aunts were caught a few days into the trip and sent to the gas chambers at Treblinka. The eldest son, Mikhail, was caught foraging food by the Gestapo in southern France and summarily executed on the spot. My father, who was 9, his younger brother Joseph, and my grandfather fled into northern Spain and were hidden by the remnants of the Zamoristas in Catalonia. Joseph developed pneumonia and died somewhere in northern Spain. My grandfather and father were smuggled into Portugal, onto a boat, and eventually made it to New Palestine. After the war, my grandfather had had enough of the Zionists, and he was finally granted a U.S. immigration visa and came here in 1947. I was born on American soil in 1961. I grew up hearing the stories. I guess this shit just follows my DNA.
I asked my parents. They said it was when they started arresting people on the street without any sort of oversight or procedure. Many of those people began disappearing. No record of their arrests. No trace of them at any jail or prison. That's when they knew it was time to go.
My mother and her parents left Bosnia in 1991 when the Iron Curtain came down and Yugoslavia started falling. They saw the whole conflict and genocides coming as the Serbs, and the Croatians were even under Yugoslavia, treating the Bosniaks worse.
I had a friend whose family escaped Mostar for Norway. He said the Serbs would put bombs in car tires and roll them down the hill into the village.
We left Ukraine in 2011. I suppose. We did it as soon as we got immigration visas. Started the immigration process when it became clear that the dear leader, Yanukovych, was imminently returning to power. We got lucky. It took us just over a year to leave. My grandpa spent 2 years in prison for organizing a workers' strike against the socialist regime in Poland. Everyone in the family was looking to leave once he got released from prison. Thankfully, some years later the 1989 revolution happened and we were able to return.
We left Poland after a drunk cop crashed into the fire truck. My dad was responding into a fire. The cop and his friends tried to get my dad to take the blame. They'd harass him, even started turning up to my grandmother's house with warnings that unless he took the blame, Things would get worse. My granddad was still alive at the time and he told my folks to leave as the police wouldn't stop. My parents ended up leaving for Germany first. Then both the kids ended up settling in Australia and haven't really looked back.